Hello and welcome to a sunny Sunday afternoon at Wisley Airfield. Now I haven't come here to catch a plane because apparently the last one left in 1973, but it does afford a good opportunity to test the new Stryd here, which is meant to detect wind. So I thought what's better way than to run along a straight into a sort of wind and see what results we get. So the runway stretches out for about 1.25 miles, and although it's not very windy today, it just definitely feels like there's a slight headwind, maybe about 5 miles an hour going out that way, which I'm going to go, and then it's slightly uphill that way as well, I think. Stryd isn't actually the first person to attempt this. It was Garmin, as you can see on my multiple watches here, you can never have enough, is also brought out a power app where they use weather forecasting to model the effects of wind. So we're going to run with that as well, and we're going to try and run with the old Stryd and the Garmin without the wind to see what difference there is. Now the Stryd goes onto your shoes here.
So this is the new one on my left shoe, Nike Pegasus Turbo 2s I've got on. And the other one there is the old Stryd, which doesn't have the wind detection, obviously. So I'm going to try both of these and see how we get along. So hello, we're on the run. I'm trying to average about 6:45 lap mile pace to make this a fair effort. This is definitely hard work this way, into the breeze, marginally uphill, so and we're fresh, so it's a good test to see how the effort changes when we come back. Okay, see you later. Okay, so we've done the outward leg, that's easterly direction. It was into the wind and slightly uphill. It felt quite hard because of the wind. Because it's so exposed here, even like a 5 mile an hour wind, which we had today, feels quite tough. So we're going to run back now and do the same 1.25 miles at the same speed. I averaged around about 6:40 to 6:45, just looking at my lap pace on my Garmin. So I could try and run the same sort of pace back to see how the powers compare. Quick tour of Wisley. Now all those old tyres used to be across the runway, which sort of hindered your progress here. They seem to have moved them now, and that thing over there is like a beacon, which I think is useful for planes to get some sort of bearing on where they are. Otherwise this is rather deserted. It seems amazing. We're right next to the junction, quite very near junction 10 of the M25 and the A3 main trunk road down to the south coast, Portsmouth, and yet apart from the odd passing car on the lane there, can't see anybody at all in what would be like, you imagine, 1.25 miles traffic on late Friday afternoon in the roads around here. There'd be a bit more than just me, wouldn't there? So an interesting historical perspective. There were plans to turn this into some sort of big village, but I think those plans have been turned down, but you never know when they might come up again. I think there was also a plan to turn this into some sort of waste disposal area about 10 years ago, which also seems to come to nothing apart from those tyres. So an interesting World War II former airfield that was used by Vickers, I think, until the early 70s. 1973, according to Wikipedia, was the last plane that flew from here. But the tarmac basically remains. There's loads of public footpaths that cross the runway and go partly up it. So you kind of sort of allowed here, even if you might necessarily be on the exact path where the official path is all the time. Anyway, so this is right at the edge of the runway. Imagine if any planes would have shot over, they would have landed in this field, and through there, that hedge there is a country lane heading towards I think Ockham's on the right, and Wisley Gardens is somewhere over that way. So right, we're going to run back now and see how we get on. Okay, bye! Okay, so this way is definitely a lot easier. Marginally downhill, and whatever wind is slightly helping. So I'm averaging just about 6:40, but it definitely feels easier this way. Just going over where the tyres were there. Okay, see you later.
Okay, so we're back at the end nearest Ripley now, having done our run back. That was definitely a lot easier that way, slightly downhill, but more importantly, it was whatever wind there was definitely helping. So, you know, if on a bike time trial day, you definitely want to be going that way than this way. Running wise, yeah, you can definitely feel the effort. So what we need to do later on is go and analyse the data, see what we can see in terms of the power numbers. We expect the power numbers to be higher on the way out for more or less the same speed, don't we? And we need to see whether the wind effect is any different in these ones with the wind models in compared to the ones with just elevation, where there was a very marginal help with elevation there, but mostly I think it's the wind in such an exposed area that's going to determine how fast or slowly you run on these sort of courses. Dead flat tarmac, pretty much firm all the way, nothing to get in your way apart from one fence and a little bit of a mini mound to get over where the tyres used to be. Okay, so let's wrap it up there and we'll look back later with some data. Bye! Hello, so this is the graph from the Stryd Power Centre of our run up the runway, going eastward here first and then westward back. So if we add on the air power contribution to the graph, then we can see this was the day when, in the video, when there was a slight headwind going out and it was slightly uphill. So if we add on elevation, and you can see the scale's a bit exaggerated here, but we definitely were going uphill that way and then downhill the back. And then you can also see that the air power contribution was much more when it was a slight headwind than it was the other way. Now I actually did a run the previous evening. It was a bit too dark to film and the conditions were actually opposite. So if we have a look at that graph, then here we are. This is the graph, so the opposite day. So on this day we had a tailwind going out, we had a headwind coming back, and you can see that they had the opposite conditions. So if we look at a summary of all the results, which is here. So on the day of the video, going into the slight headwind, going into the very slight elevation, 0.5%, I reckon it is, and we were going 638 mile pace out, 636 back, so almost identical. So we had 314 watts from the Stryd Wind going out, but only 295 coming back. So you can see that there was a bit of a difference there. And in comparison, the Stryd Summit, which doesn't measure wind, had more or less the same, 290 out, 284 back. So you can definitely see that the Stryd Wind is picking up more watts. If we look at the other day when we had a tailwind going out, then we actually had 11 watts less, even though it was slightly uphill that way, whereas the Stryd Summit was more or less the same, 273 and 271. Now, interestingly, with the Garmin, which is, this is the Garmin graph from the sunny day. So the wind there was 5 miles an hour, more or less into the headwind. And on the other day, we had a 9 miles an hour tailwind going out that way. So those results were actually more interesting, more marked actually. So with the day when we had the headwinds going out, it was 400 watts, only 365 coming back, and almost the opposite when we had the tailwind going out, 360, 390. So in fact, the Garmin actually adds sort of more for the wind than perhaps the Stryd does. But in conclusion, both seem to work. How well they work, I think, needs further study, further experimentation, and getting used to it. But certainly promising. Rather than an idealised test, of course, up a straight. And obviously, you don't normally run dead straight for a mile and a quarter normally. So need to see how the different ones affect things. Obviously, the Stryd has the advantage that you don't need to pre-program your Garmin with a weather forecast. And the weather forecast could, of course, be completely out from where you are locally. So definitely the Stryd is probably the one that is a bit more useful in real time. But it's interesting to see that the Garmin one does actually seem to work in this situation. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on another one. Okay, bye.